Eye on Gauteng, brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Economic Development.
Welcome back. You're watching Eye on Gauteng. We're talking youth entrepreneurship. Still with us, Molefi Oliphant, Dr. Jack Ledwaba, and Ernest Mamabolo. Now, before the break, we were talking about training, funding, and mentorship. The bank managers and those people that are providing funding. There is a funding component in the YH program, but the ordinary entrepreneur would have to go and convince his bank manager, look, I've got this idea, it's great, it's going to work, I'm going to make millions for myself and pay you back. That's where most entrepreneurs get stuck, because banks are extremely conservative and we don't have a culture of venture capitalism. What is the story there?
Well, firstly, let's put it very clear that the entrepreneur or the participant will not be left alone to approach the bank.
Okay.
We call it funding facilitation, so which is a conversation already happening now to secure funders of the particular loan component. Okay. And also the money that's set aside by Gauteng.
How much is Gauteng putting in the program?
Well, it's putting in 90 million of a MTF 3-year process, which per year is about 30 million. So we're looking at other DFIs to come on board to augment and increase just the grant component. And so the conversations are...
And what's the appetite so far?
Well, the response is very positive, I must say. We've had a number of huge response from various private companies that's saying, for example, if you go to Citibank and your focus area is young people there, will come in as businesses investing in Citibank, doing business there, to contribute towards your grant portion.
All right.
So the response is great in that sense.
Dr. Ledwaba, in your experience, I mean, you are somebody that has an excellent track record. You can go into the bank and they will just give you what you want. Why do you think youth struggle in that particular aspect? I know they've got a component that they're going to be supported, but ordinary entrepreneurs that are not part of YH, why do they struggle?
It's quite simple. It's the tradition of funding in our country. It's also undergoing osmosis itself and changes. And one of the reasons for that is also the two-pronged approach. The way youth articulates their ideas. Remember, the bank manager only has papers in front of them, so they don't go first where the business is at. So they only have to listen to you. And so that's why YH is now retraining people to be able to articulate their visions or their businesses correctly to the bank manager, so the bank manager understands that. So that is basically it. And you talked about venture capitalism. Many banks nowadays are also trying to change to look at venture capitalism, because funders wants to lend money so they can get their fees out of it. You know, I had a meeting with Standard Bank, especially on the enterprise development. They're saying we're not lending enough because they're not getting those fees. So they too, they do have a huge appetite to fund.
All right.
But the only problem is risk element, and that's where YH come in and say we'll help mitigate that risk.
All right. Ernest, I want to bring you in the whole funding aspect, the fact that young entrepreneurs are seen as a huge risk and they don't normally succeed in getting those kind of loans and funds from the bank. In your experience, how do you think you've sort of helped them to curtail that, or at least express their need for capital better?
Yeah, I think the one thing, and I mean, I think funding is an area I'm passionate about as well, and the issue of dealing with banks, because in my experience, what I've seen quite a lot of is when a young person approaches the bank and the bank rejects them, you know, they suddenly feel like, this is it for me. I can't go on with my business. It's a rejection of the actual business. Whereas banks operate on a different model, and you know the shareholders are the first point of interest, obviously, and you know making sure that you've got collateral, for example, which a lot of young people don't have. I think it's important to spend a lot of time in the prep stage, ensuring that they've got a solid business plan. That where they don't have capital, they've got other ways to augment some of the other requirements that the bank looks at to ensure that there's a better consideration that they may receive bank funding.
Well, I think that's a very interesting discussion, and I'm sure we can go into days talking about that. Mol, if you want to get in quickly?
Yes, please. I just wanted to say, for this, we spoke about one element so far in terms of funding those who have got just a business idea and no business experience. But there's another component to YH that includes those who are currently existing businesses, failing and struggling businesses. Those people we put through what is called turnaround business solution workshops to investigate what has gone wrong in the business in the first place. Why are you not getting funding from the bank? Why is your business not growing? So investigate all of that and then tailor-make the solutions to the particular area of need. I think that's what we are proposing going forward.
So obviously, Khomoto in the inset doesn't fall into the category of somebody that's just starting out. She's an existing business, and she's going to get support if she's successful in the application.
Well, existing business, yes, certainly not just those who are struggling and collapse and have an invention. I think she certainly qualifies. And she qualifies because she's already demonstrated an entrepreneur culture in her own lifestyle. And what we need to take further is to support her to grow that, because we are saying we build and support entrepreneurs to create jobs. So essentially that's what we want to do. These are the people we must be supporting, because she can come in later on also as a mentor to mentor other businesses to come to her level and grow. From where she comes from.
We're talking entrepreneurship, we're talking not tenderpreneurship, and we have a culture of tenderpreneurship, or we don't. We have been told that the Y age is going to be the answer to those people that think business is a quick solution, turn a quick buck, go in there with your government contacts and win a tender and make millions. But how important is it to have some sort of government contacts? Let's be honest, we are actually in Africa, and if you don't have government contacts, then you probably maybe just dead in the water. I don't know.
I don't know. Honestly, I don't. But in this process,
maybe I'm asking the wrong person. Dr. Ledwaba.
I think you see, Lionel, even with your articulation, it's all wrong. Let me correct this.
Right.
A business person needs to network with other players in the industry. That's why at Ledwaba Chambers we actually have a physical building, and where on every Friday government people and entrepreneurs just from the local streets, they got together on a Friday after work, and first there is a little bit of a formality in terms of looking at opportunities. And one of the things that I want to talk to, and which is what we're going to be doing with YH, is also to look at issues of export. If you look at South Africa, one of the reasons why you have these so-called close players is because the South African market now is getting saturated. But if you look at it in the context of Africa, I mean, what can you import into Libya? South Sudan has just become a new country. They need everything from soap to toothbrush. And what can we do? Then this issue of infrastructure that the president was talking about. How do we transport the goods over there? And so in terms of friendship, that's why even right now I'm going to be engaging those governments. I'm going to be engaging the Libyans. I'll be engaging Sudanese to say, how is entrepreneurs in South Africa engaged with your countries? So yes, you do need the government contacts, but in a correct way. Not in the way that is being articulated. And quite frankly, that's why as business, we take a little bit of an offense to the word tenderpreneurship, as used for political gains.
Okay, let's bring Ernest in. Ernest, you've been on the ground, you've seen these youngsters try to get through and help them to become successful. What is your take on this whole tenderpreneurship debate?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it from this point of view, that government is the single biggest spender, procurer of goods and services, then who should be buying those goods and services, or who should be providing them rather to government? Government has a clear mandate to support, businesses, and in particular, certain type of businesses. So one shouldn't shy away from doing business with government. I think what has tended to happen over the years is that, the bigger slices of the cake, so to speak, may have gone to certain individuals and repeatedly, and that has tended to then make everybody else look at the whole issue of doing business with government in a very, very negative light. But I think, on its own, doing business with government is not a bad thing. I'd actually encourage it if you've got...
It's sustainable.
It
All right.
definitely is.
I want to talk to you, Ernest, and I'll ask you, gentlemen, to weigh in on this. Self-belief, you mentioned very, nicely in the beginning that youngsters have this, or youth have this never say die attitude. They are very brave. Older people would probably think twice. But there's some level of self-doubtedness that has set into South African youth. They don't really believe they can do it. Do you find that in your dealings and in your experience on the ground?
Yeah, and I think this is actually a legacy of our past rather. And you might say that, well, the young people that we support now, primarily between the ages of 18 and 35, and were born after apartheid. But I don't think a lot of what was taught to our parents and was then passed down to us hasn't been reversed. A lot of people still do, struggle with self-confidence issues. And I mean, I started a business on my own about 3 years ago, and it took me 3 years before I could leave formal employment to run the business full time, even when the business was generating enough cash flow to, to keep me in it. Now imagine a lot of the other young people who at least wouldn't have the opportunity to have a decent job, or who don't have the support structures in the communities. It's quite difficult,
Dr. Ledwaba, self-belief, is it a problem?
Very, very, very seriously so. I mean, if you look at the whole issue of why do I start business, it's easier when you're employed, because you are required to fill a timesheet. You get there by 8 o'clock, and I mean, as one of the
guaranteed check at the
exactly,
end of the month.
and the 25th, when I was still a scientist and an engineer, I knew 25th my account is okay. Then the employer gets worried about other things. But as an entrepreneur, you wake up 3 o'clock in the morning and you start to rethink of what you know. So it is very important. That's one of the things that I want to share with you, and we're bringing this one under mentorship, the word counseling and the word coaching. I've got a program now at Ledwaba called CEO Coaching. Because why? It's to also bring out, and this is coming out in my book, where I say, let's unleash the monster within, because it talks to issues of confidence. People want to do it, but if they don't self-believe, how can you buy a product of someone who don't believe? You can see they walk in your office, they're already doubting themselves. You're going to doubt the product and everything.
Well, if the people that you've seen so far that have applied for YH, do they have that self-belief? Do they need help? How are you going to help?
I think certainly what we should really clarify very clearly, and I think I want to also further emphasize and speak to the issue of our past. I think many of our young people, the people that we are currently recruiting, come from street corners. And they've been sitting there thinking, brainstorming ideas, and they are convinced they're going to work.
Right.
But the minute they get told that it won't work is where the challenge begins. So essentially what we need to do is also to understand that they have been exposed to many platforms where they've been made vulnerable. And that vulnerability still exists because sometimes the hesitation, the apathy, the disillusionment comes from all of what they've been exposed to. So what we should take into account as we address that question is take into account all of these other things. I think it's there, but it can be addressed and it can be healed.
So 125,000 applicants, you've got a job on your hands. We wish you everything of the best, and we'll be watching your success. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. Ernest, Dr. Ledwaba, and Molefe.